mate.
Hey, Sam, how are you?
I'm good. George, right? How are you doing?
Yes. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good.
Good. It's been quite a run up to these tours, but yeah, kind of starting to relax now. It's all in place.
Are you guys ever been rehearsing for the upcoming European tour?
Been where? Sorry.
Rehearsing for the upcoming
Ye-
European tour?
Yeah, definitely. We've been busy doing it because obviously we're doing the European tour and then we're coming back and then going straight back over to America. So we've got kind of a bunch of different sets we're trying to rehearse and balance and so forth. It's been quite a job.
Yeah. Is it when you guys are planning a tour, when you guys come to time to pick up the set list, how difficult it is?
Well, I mean, it gets more difficult every couple of years when we have another album added to it. I mean, as it is right now, we're on 5 albums, and obviously the latest of those albums we never got to tour on because of the pandemic and all of that kind of stopping. So, we kind of have to favor that a little bit, but at the same time, especially playing places we don't get to play very often, we've got 4 other competing albums full of songs that we have to juggle, I suppose. So it's tricky, but it's fun as well.
Yeah. And speaking about Rise Radiant, the album came out precisely, or let's give it a month or so, when the world closed down. How
Yep.
frustrating was for you guys to have an album out and all of a sudden, what are you going to
It,
do with it?
Oh man, yeah, it was a nightmare in every sense. Like I actually still remember we were getting to the very end of production, sort of like early 2020, like January, February. And of course that was the time that we were all just hearing the first murmurs of, this pandemic that was either going to be terrible, wasn't going to be bad. You remember how conflicted it was at the very, very beginning. And at that point, we already had, like tickets on sale for a almost 5 week US headline tour. Like we had all of our plans perfectly set for this album to roll out and all of that to work. And of course, we all just had to come to terms over the coming months, like leading up to the album's release, with the fact that, it was decreasingly likely. But, the worst part is really more that we had a new record. And it's weird to explain this, but when you have a record, you obviously get to know it really well musically when you're
Yeah.
recording it, when you're writing it, when you're recording it, but you don't really get to know the songs until you take them on tour and you sort of get to, put them out to an audience, have that energy given back to you. And, you really get a sense for what they mean to people. And we never got to do that with Rise Radiant, at least not until the very recent past, since we've, recommenced touring and so forth. So yeah, it was a nightmare that, what happened throughout 2020, definitely.
But obviously, the album was released in 2020, but you guys been working on the songs probably for a while. It probably takes time, to compose, to write. So the songs are probably old for you, but you still feel the excitement of playing them live, or it's just a case now we have to play them, but the excitement is a bit gone, or that never goes away.
Yeah, no, not at all. To be honest, I mean, a big part of it obviously is that fact that we never got to know them in that setting at the time. So even though, yeah, we'd written them in some cases like 18 months or so before that kind of 2020 period when it all started closing down. Even so, there's stuff that we've learned about these songs by finally taking them on the road. So no, to be honest, I mean, it's just kind of a thrill to finally be back. There's nothing worse for someone sort of inclined towards being a musician, being an artist, than the idea that you're kind of locked away from being able to do that for all of that time. So to be honest, now that we're finally back in the tour trail and all of that kind of stuff, I mean, even if we were limited to just playing stuff from way back in the day that we've played a million times live, it would still be a thrill
Yeah.
just because we finally get to do it again.
Yeah. And the new songs, you talked about getting the feedback from the crowd, the reaction. When you play them live, do you have the sense of the songs that work best? The ones that the fans, are more into. Do you guys have that perception when you are on the stage?
Yeah, definitely. Rise Radiant's an interesting record because we actually wrote it, a lot of it, on tour, like on tour in Europe, on tour in Australia, everywhere else that we kind of went in that last period. And it had as part of its impetus this idea of being an album that would be performed live. Now, you might hear that and just be like, isn't that every album? And yeah, to some degree it is, but the preceding album, In Contact, was one where we sort of spent a lot of time focusing on this big lofty concept. And, you know, there are songs that break up the kind of flow a little bit more because that's the idea. It's a bit more of a narrative, you know, it needs a little bit more of that ebb and flow. But in the case of Rise Radiant, most of the songs really were constructed with the idea of like, we're going to play these in, you know, these bigger kind of club shows and stuff that we've been experiencing. And with the idea in mind of how they'd be perceived, at least to some degree. So songs like The Tempest and Slow Violence and Ocean Rise and so forth, they really were conceived as like, you know, songs that would work live. And fortunately, because of course we have finally been able to test them over the last little while, they're fantastic, and it's going to be hard to imagine them ever leaving the set list, you know.
And you know, when I know some bands, you know, when they play when they play the songs live, that's when they come to life, so to say, and then they realize that there are parts that probably doesn't work as well, and over time they decide to change little bits on the songs to make them work. You know, they work better because initially the idea was good, but when they play live they realize they could be better. Did that ever happen with you guys with songs that you decided to extend, let's say the outro or the guitar solo, whatever, extended a bit the melody? Did that ever happen with the songs you guys recorded, and when you played live you're like, okay, it works better, slightly different?
Yeah, you know, interestingly enough, it's a good question. I don't think that kind of question's come up in any of the press I've done this year, and it's actually a really interesting one because I think about it a lot. You know, obviously, when it comes to kind of writing music and producing music, given that those are both like they're my charge in the band. You know, I tend to be the formative songwriter and then the producer of all of the music. And I put a lot of effort into the idea that like the song is kind of free in a production stage to be whatever it needs to be. That might mean that, you know, we're using keyboards or instruments that don't really exist in a live performance outside of like tracks and stuff like that. But when it comes to live, one of the things that we often find is that like if you've got an intro, which is largely a kind of keys based thing or something, it's just kind of, I don't know. There's nothing I hate more than the kind of standing on stage as the track plays before we all come in. So a lot of that kind of stuff we do change and like reorient, so it feels a bit more like a band first concept. And I think that's actually something that like a lot of our live arrangements do focus around. You know, like having some keys and stuff on the tracks is fine, but I don't want anything like that to get in the way of what we're kind of putting out there as a band, like the actual live energy. So those are the things that tend to change the most. Like when I get really kind of free in the production part of the process, and then at the end have to look back and be like, oh shit, how are we going to actually perform this live? Those are the things that I tend to tweak a little bit for that reason.
And you know, being producing you know, music and the band in a way, can you be, you know, can you write and you produce? Obviously, you have probably a very firm idea of what you want, even though you talked about, you know, the songs being free in the production setting. But can you differentiate the musician and the producer role when you're in the studio?
I'm going to be honest. I'm quite bad at differentiating the role. Like I tend to swap hats at the drop of a hat. Oh, terrible use of expressions there. Excuse me. But it's one of those things where, like, when I'm in kind of music creation mode, from the very first like germ of ideas, like when we're, you know, creating a new song or something like that, I'm usually kind of jumping straight into the production side of it, like thinking about the tones and the presentation and the arrangement. I think it's actually kind of a surprisingly big part of like how our music works. You know, it's important to us that at the foundation of a song there is this very simple skeleton, like some chords, a really nice melody, some nice lyrics to accompany it. But I find that my mind tends to very quickly start veering into, you know, that more kind of sonically expansive territory. Like, what can I do to make this really speak? So to be perfectly honest, I'm pretty bad at it. And I think especially as the recording goes on, you know, the reality is that like I'm thinking about guitar probably less through a lot of the production than I should. And then usually towards the end of production, so, oh shit, I got to put together some cool guitar solos and, kind of bring this all together so it sounds really good. I just love the adventure that sonic kind of experimentation phase can take me on and take us on. Like, I know we all kind of enjoy this. So yeah, look, the short version is I'm not particularly good at swapping between the roles, but I do it a lot,
And when you're writing a song, how much normally does a song evolve? Because I know bands that, they have 3, 4, 5, 6 different versions of the song. And for you, how much can a song evolve to a point where you say, okay, I've done too much, I have to scale down now a bit?
Yeah, it definitely does come up sometimes. I think our process sort of, as it's evolved over the years, like our songwriting process, which usually describes me and Jim, our singer, like we tend to work together on most of the songs from very early on. Whereas a lot of bands in the metal world tend to have the kind of approach of creating some music, some riffs, some chords, whatever, and then somewhat separately or somewhat discreetly, like adding lyrics and adding melodies to it after the fact. We try and make it so from the very beginning of an idea, appearing, manifesting, we're almost immediately trying to add melody and add lyrical content so that then that melody and lyrical content can suggest where the next section of the song goes. So as a result, we kind of have this process that it's quite holistic, like it's quite top-down looking. We sort of see the bigger picture fairly early on in the process and then start working towards that. And I really like the idea that, like, when I'm creating music, I'm not moving with whims. You know what I mean? I'm doing it rather with an idea of like, where should this go? What should it say? A lot of artists really like the idea of like the music just takes them wherever it's going to go. But I kind of like trying to work it into something that makes narrative sense and makes kind of like let's say like makes sense in terms of the way the music and the lyrics interact. So as a result, we don't tend to have much where a song veers off track and we have to find an alternate version. Usually it's although quite time consuming, something that tends to be reasonably predictable as we start digging into it more and we start understanding the song a little bit more, if that makes sense. So it's pretty rare that we have like alternate versions. It's definitely happened a few times over the years, but especially now, as comfortable as we are working together, especially Jim and I, we are able to, carve it out pretty accurately and then get a good sense of where it's going and then, finish it off, make it all come together. That said, it can take a long time.
And you were talking, and I think it's always interesting when you were saying that some musicians like to see where the song takes them and, vice versa. But when you have a concept in mind for a lyric, you really cannot let the song free flow
exactly. The lyric will tell you where it should be going, know. And actually, that's exactly right. Like, I would sort of argue that those who still try and relinquish the kind of control of the direction of the music at that point are really missing out on something, because you can obviously harness it. You can make the song instead like really bend to the will of the theme, and it becomes, at least by my estimation, or at least this is the theory, this is why I like it. You can make it make a lot more sense, like as a large scale kind of statement. It's a good observation.
Yeah, because for me, music, just like a movie, everything has to be taken into account. Because if you're watching a horror movie, you don't want a pop song to suddenly pop up.
Yeah, it could be a big clash if it's not exactly where it's meant to go.
So everything has to be, at the level of, what the narrative is, lyrics, words, to create ambience. So, I'm a true believer that everything needs to be taken into account when you're making music.
We are of the same mind. Yeah, absolutely.
And because we talked about all of this, is the song ever truly finished?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's definitely one of these things that we've struggled with a lot over the years, especially when it comes to like those big, long, expansive kind of, very prog-ish pieces of music. I mean, for us, it's really only finished the moment we say, okay, we've got to get in the studio now and record it. You know what I mean? But I guess to go back to one of your previous questions, the beauty is, well, maybe it's beauty, maybe it's a shortcoming, I don't know. Obviously, as you perform it live over the years, it does tend to, take on a form of its own. Parts sometimes change, especially after you've been playing a song for so long. So I guess the short answer is no, it's probably not ever finished.
I'm sure, like, if you revisit a song, 10 years down the road, you probably could get inspired to change it into something completely different. And
Yeah, we've done that a couple of times in our catalog. So we actually we used to do bonus tracks for most of our releases, which would try and go 2 albums back and do a kind of reimagined version of a previous song, but it's usually in a kind of very different setting just to explore the concept. But yeah, no, absolutely.
is that inspiring as well when you, because you know I don't, I talked with many musicians throughout the years. I know some musicians have told me they don't listen to music or to current music. Michael Schenker, Yngwie Malmsteen, for instance. Those are two musicians that say they don't listen to, especially when they are on writing mode, because they want to be influenced by anything other than what's on their mind. How does that work for you? When you listen to a music, does that inspire you to write, but you're afraid that you're just copying something?
I think less so now than in the past. I mean, I remember being a lot more deliberate about it, like in the kind of early days of this band and like previous projects and whatnot, where yeah, I would be frightened about knowing who my favorite artists were and knowing that my inclinations in a lot of cases in those days would be to try and get as close as I can to the kind of stuff I love. But the beauty is that, we've carved out a bit of a niche for ourselves in Caligula's Horse. There's a certain brand of music that, we've, again, I guess just refined over the years, never really with much conscious thought, more just in that evolutionary manner. We've done the particular creative process we've done for so long, and we've found so many things that we like that feel like they're ours, that I just don't really fear it that much anymore. But in saying that, I mean, I don't find that I listen to a huge amount of music when I'm in writing mode, but I think it's more just because I spend so much time through that, through the day, through the week, with my own music, that I'm kind of burned out listening to other music by the end of it. I'll just listen to a podcast for my commute or whatever, But I don't feel necessarily worried about that inspiration being enough to kind of knock me off my own trajectory of like stylistic growth or creation. Because, I like to think I'm reasonably comfortable with what it is that I am attracted to in the musical world anyway. And, that's what I seek out, even if it feels like it might be somewhat at odds with some of the music I listen to. I mean, for what it's worth, and you probably heard this as a cliche a lot of times as well, I don't really listen to that much heavy music, just because I create it all day. I play it all day. I don't want to listen to more of it. I listen to some chill electronic music or some jazz or, something else just to have something different, I guess.
I normally say that, I used to play guitar, and because I was so bad at it, I stopped playing it. I just didn't put the effort, and you need to, for an instrument, you need to really put the time. And I was just lazy. I wanted to do other things. But I remember that if I listened, because I worked in radio for many, many years, and I remember if I listened like to pop music, when I grabbed the guitar, the music would be way heavier than
Yeah, exactly.
and
You slingshot in the opposite direction, don't
yeah,
you?
and if I was listening to heavy music just before I pick up the guitar, I probably would go for something more acoustic and more calm. And
I think that's an awesome way of looking at it. And that actually really answers, with my long-winded answer to that question before. I mean, that's actually a much more elegant way of putting it. Like, I don't really worry about, falling into the groove of some other artist who I'm enjoying, for the simple fact that I don't want to just hear the same thing over and over again anyway, So I agree completely. I think that's a really good way of putting it, actually.
do you have any boundaries when it comes to songwriting for Caligula's Horse? Do you think there is boundary that you shouldn't cross musically?
You know what's funny is it's actually explicitly come up a bunch of times. Whenever we sort of commence writing, the new album, like whatever we're currently working on, there's always a bit of a discussion at the start of like, what are we trying to do this time? What's it going to say relative to what we've done in the past? What's going to be new and so forth? Obviously, being kind of positioned in the progressive metal world, we do try and make sure that everything feels like it has some kind of counterpoint to what we've done in the past. But in terms of like what's off limits, we try and be pretty diverse, but we also try to integrate ideas. So this actually, funnily enough, I guess it perfectly latches onto my answer to the previous question somewhat, where it's like I might be listening to say like some kind of post-bop jazz or something. And what I'm listening to in that music isn't necessarily the kind of exploratory improvisation. I might be listening and finding some chord tones or some particular fundamental aspect of the music I'm listening to that I could then integrate in what I'm doing. So in other words, it's like, we don't need to veer so far from the stylistic foundation that our band is based in to be able to borrow concepts that are quite distant from it. They just need to be integrated well into the music. And I think that's a big part of kind of what excites me about being like a songwriter and a producer is this idea of integration. Like, what can I take that has no place in metal and kind of hide it in some metal, And I think for what it's worth, I think like a lot of our best songs, a lot of the songs that have really kind of stood up to, kind of crowd favorites and stuff over the years have a surprising amount of that kind of thing hidden in there. Like, I said I don't listen to much metal. I mean, it's very true. Like, there are so many elements outside of metal that as soon as you explore how they'd fit into an arrangement, like how you'd place them on a distorted guitar or how you'd situate them in some keys that are then surrounded by bass, guitar, vocal harmonies, whatever, it's surprising how much you can kind of nestle in there and have it still make some amount of sense, like stylistic sense. It doesn't have to feel like kind of those more pastiche-esque bands, or a lot of those in the 90s where it's like we're doing the funk section, we're doing the metal section, I'm talking about, right? So we try and be really kind of integrative in the way that we do that stuff. And look, I don't know if it always works, but I get really excited kind of exploring those type of ideas anyway. Yeah. So maybe the exploration tends to be enough to stimulate me artistically,
But you're talking in a musician perspective. When it comes to a fan perspective, they're a bit more, let's say, narrow-minded sometimes.
Potential. Oh, I mean, we have played so many, like say heavy metal festivals where we are definitely the lightest band on the bill and probably have no business being there. And we'll come out with our pretty chords and our soft, falsetto vocals, and you'll just have a group of people kind of doing this, just like arms crossed, not quite getting it. And you're right. I mean, like at the end of the day, there are certainly people who that exploratory approach I'm describing, we're not really their tribe musically, you know what I mean? Like, and that's kind of fine with us. Like, if nothing else, having that somewhat distinctive approach, which is going to be divisive to some people or going to just not rub some people the right way, it's also the thing that's going to really excite other people. You know what I mean? Like, we have a lot of fans who will tell us things like, metal is not what they're generally into, but they can listen to us and they can enjoy us. And that's usually a pretty cool compliment, because at least it suggests there's some different element to what we're doing, I suppose. Yeah. But no, you're exactly right. I mean, we've definitely seen that over the years. It's not necessarily for everyone, especially the more intense of the metal crowd. It might be a little bit kind of pretty or, harmonically colorful.
For me, the problem is the way everything is labeled, because I'm getting tired of just listening to people, and you don't get me wrong, when people say like post black metal or yeah, post rock, I don't know what the fuck is that.
It gets weird very quick, doesn't it?
What is post something? Is post what? I mean, they're not black metal anymore, or they're not rock anymore. What is that? What concept? And for me, it's music shouldn't have so many labels. I understand there is a ferocious need to put stuff in boxes for whoever, But for me, when people complain about like a festival that's very diverse musically, I don't see anything wrong with that.
Mm.
Music is for everyone, and it will give a chance for a known artist or a genre like, let's say, metal, that it's a more of a niche, to probably be exposed to a crowd that normally
Mm.
wouldn't listen or even get close to that. And after they seen that festival, they're like, okay, I'm going to check them out. And with that,
Yeah, definitely.
it snowballs to discovering other bands. So I never understand why people like say heavy metal festivals should be just heavy metal. I mean, after a
Yeah.
fucking day of listening just to F
Oh,
bands,
day of the
you know,
heaviest stuff, way too much, you know?
yeah, and
No,
after
I'm
three
with you
days,
completely.
I'm dead. I don't want to listen to more heavy metal.
Yeah, and
I'm
that's when having that
tired.
lighter band on the bill or something can just make such a huge difference, you
Yeah,
know? Like there's nothing like having a bit of a blend where you've got the kind of relaxing moment, you can get lifted back up, you've got power, you've got the quiet. I don't know. I need those contrasts. And I mean you can hear that in our music as well. You know, I get bored with one dynamic level very, very quickly. You know, it's and again, it does make it so that potentially you're going to have some people who are kind of put off by that kind of thing, but frankly it's just the thing that excites us, you know. I think we kind of use the because I'm with you as well, by the way, about kind of the genre the genre thing. I mean, people need to label stuff to be able to find it and whatever else, but it does tend to be a little bit more limiting, a little bit more
yeah.
prescriptive when people are, you know, people will tell you I listen to black metal, that's what I'm interested in, that's it. For us, we tend to use the kind of genre qualifier like progressive as a kind of stand-in for we're just going to explore a bunch of different things, and you
Yeah.
know you may or may not like some of it. And look, for what it's worth, I wrote a doctorate on progressive rock and the history of that music, and I've sort of problematized it a lot. But I think it's actually a pretty nice, easy catch-all for like here's metal, but with some other things
Yeah.
thrown in, you know. So that tends to be why we sort of go with that as, you know, as what we are, even if it's a little bit equally limiting in terms of, you know, what the style is and so
Yeah.
forth.
And we spoke about the tour. You guys are playing Portugal on August 6th at the Comendatio Festival, Music Festival. What can we expect from, obviously, Rise Radiant is going to be a probably important part of the set list, as we were speaking earlier. Do you guys have any ideas of the set list? What can you expect from the Caligula's Horse live show?
Well, firstly, it's going to be a long set, you know, so we're headlining the day and we've got a pretty broad selection from the whole, you know, like cross sections from all across our catalogue. So, yeah, you're right. Rise Radiant will feature quite prominently. But we have songs from basically the whole catalogue going back. We're not playing anything off Moments, probably shouldn't spoil too much there, but everything from there on, we're you know, doing at least a song or two. And yeah, we'll be playing for a long time and kind of finally get to, you know, stretch our legs on stage again, especially in Portugal. We haven't been to Portugal since 2018.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can, you know, deliver something for everyone in that sense. There's certainly everything from the heaviest of our music through to some softer stuff with a bit more space and so forth.
It's going to be a nice roller coaster then.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so as well. And just to wrap it up, obviously, people have been talking about rise costs of touring for a
Mm.
band that lives in Australia. How expensive it is for you guys,
Oh, yeah,
to come to this side of the pond and do a tour.
it is truly brutal right now. And I mean, the thing is, you know, we as you say, we're an Australian band. You know, we're used to touring being quite expensive and quite logistically difficult. I mean, you know, we'll be on our combined flights from Australia to, I think we land in Heathrow in London for like 30 something hours. You know, that's kind of the norms of those trips. But no, look, I guess it's important to acknowledge that you've probably seen in this festival season, like there have been so many bands pulling out of festivals, so many bands pulling out like even quite late from festivals and club shows and stuff like that. We actually ran into some situations exactly with that, with like bands we planned to tour with pulling out last minute. And it's because of these rising costs, you know, like a tour in terms of like its travel budget, its bottom line stuff, it could see a rise in cost of like 40 or 50%. And that sounds like, you know, it's as catastrophic as it sounds for the bottom lines. But, you know, we also recognize that this is just the reality of the world as it is now. And, you know, we've just got to kind of adapt or fall to the wayside. But no, I'm glad you asked. It is important to point out that, yeah, it is really hard as a band to actually tour right now. But, you know, we need to do it for our own sanity as much as anything else. So that's fine for us.
Even if you have like a very tight budget, does the budget normally, when it comes to the end, you know, did you meet the specs or you
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, we're in a situation where like touring can be profitable. For a lot of bands, by the way, that's obviously not the case. And as you kind of implied at the start, for an Australian band, even more not the case, because, you know, it's it is so distant and so expensive just generally to fly across. But yeah, like, you know, most of our tours tend to land pretty well. Our budgets are looking like okay for this. We'll survive it if nothing else. But it's one of these things where, you know, people just got to come out, see us, see other artists you love. Everyone in the music industry is struggling right now. Like it's definitely a time to sort of do your best to support your local artists coming through, I suppose. Because, yeah, it does look a little bit grim. And again, just take it from all of the many bands pulling out of festivals this summer, your summer, our winter, different hemisphere, etc. But, you know, pulling out of festivals this summer, that's almost entirely why.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Sam, thank you very much for your time. You know, all the best for the upcoming tour. Looking forward to see you guys in warm Portugal, but you guys know what that is in Australia. I mean, you have your summer.
I cannot wait. I'm so excited to see Portugal again. It's going to be wonderful. All right. Thank you, George. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. And, you know, hope to see you in Portugal then on August.
Yeah, sure. Come say hi, please.
All right, Sam. Thank you very much. Have a great day and see you soon. All right. Thank you.
See you, mate.
Bye.